So with that, hello everyone and welcome back if you are joining us for part 2. If this is your very first part of the GALA 35th series, I am so excited to see you. I've just asked all participants to type in the chat just an introduction about yourself and what you're looking forward to learning with today's wonderful panel. I also want to reiterate that we are recording the presentation, so if you have friends who had to miss this, I will be able to send it to them later. My name is Ivana Marshall, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement and Inclusion Initiatives. I serve a number of our identity-based communities, including our Creme Del Association of LGBTQ+ alums, which got its start with GALA, and our Latinx and Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, Southwest Asian, or for short, APIM alumni. I'm going to give a really quick overview of tonight's program because you're not here to hear me speak. You are here to hear from our awesome panelists. We have 2 alums, Michael Pemberton and Wayne Curtis, and 1 faculty member, Dr. George Greenia, who are heavily involved in the creation of the LGBTQ+ community at William & Mary, which evolved into GALA and ultimately transformed into the Creme Del Association we know today as of this year. I want to note that we advertised that Dr. Lisa Meyer would be here, but unfortunately, she's had some travel delays and has to miss today's session. Not to worry, she sent us really wonderful remarks, and Dr. Greenia, Wayne, and Michael will be sharing them with us verbally. Now I'm going to introduce our wonderful moderator. Wayne Curtis is a native of Frederick, Virginia from the class of 1982. Shortly after earning his Master of Arts, Wayne moved to Boston and discovered that homophobia and workplace discrimination could exist even in liberal states. He secured a position with Allison Publications in 1986, which was the US's largest independent gay and lesbian publishing house, where he designed and edited books and marketing materials. Wayne joined William & Mary GALA in 1987, just 1 year after its founding as an independent organization, and served as GALA's vice president during the university's tercentenary in 1993. In 1998, Wayne rejoined GALA's board and served as treasurer and eventually president for 8 years, remaining on the board to help accomplish GALA's absorption into the Society of the Alumni, which is now the William & Mary Alumni Association. Wayne has played an absolutely critical role in rebuilding relationships between LGBTQ+ alums and William & Mary, and has worked to rebrand GALA as the Creme Del Association. If you've not had a moment to read Wayne's article on the Creme Del renaming, please look out for the link that I'll share in the chat towards the end of the program. And with that, I encourage all participants to share thoughts, to ask questions via the chat or the Q&A, and I will turn things over to Wayne. Wayne?
Thank you, Ivana. That was a very generous introduction. I appreciate it. First thing I think I want to do is just, since I've already been introduced, let our 2 panelists introduce themselves and just tell you a little bit about why they're so wonderful, because they are. And then get started in setting a stage for why we're here and what it was like 35 years ago. But the first person I'd like to ask to introduce themselves is certainly someone that I think all of us hold in a very warm place in our heart for what he has done for this community for a very long time. Professor George Greenia. George, please. We know you're wonderful, but tell us anyway.
You're too generous. I'm George Greenia. I'm a faculty member in modern languages. I arrived here in 1982. And if there's one failure now I see in my career, it's arriving the fall after Wayne graduated. So I missed having him as a student, much to my regret ever since. Excuse me. I arrived in 1982. And as many of you know, for LGBT issues back then, we were living on a different planet. Almost as soon as I arrived, the very following year, 1983, I started as faculty moderator for the Monday night gay student support group. the Gay Student Support Group got to be a real institution on campus. It was notorious back then that gay people only met in the baths, the bars, and the bushes. And I thought it was a terrible way to form relationships, drenched in secrecy, anonymity, and alcohol. We ended up meeting on the Monday night group for 24 years in the basement of the local Catholic church, just beyond the physical and psychological edge of campus. When we started, we met from 10 to 11 p.m. to help guard privacy. But as life became more open for gay people on campus and throughout America, we switched to 9 to 10 p.m. and then from 8 to 9 p.m. And as I aged, we finally, after a long day in the classroom, I took a nap before I came back to campus in the evening. And the Gay Student Support Group, I am happy to report, eventually worked itself out of a job. Gay people found each other, socialized, were visible on campus, so to the point where we didn't need a privatized Gay Student Support Group. I saw over 100 students over those years. And we had visitors as well for that Gay Student Support Group. Wonderful role models on the faculty and staff who also were gay, and also generous allies. Even President Sullivan came to visit with our group and express his personal support, even though on that other planet, he couldn't speak out openly as a presidential supporter of the gay students on his own campus. Thanks to GALA, times have changed. So I want to express my gratitude to Wayne, to Michael, to all the people who started William and Mary GALA as an independent and vital organization that really gave prestige and clout and potential embarrassment to the administration to push it along. It was a heady time, starting new initiatives, new programming, a lot of activity in Washington, D.C. We scared several presidents. Tim Sullivan was wonderful, even if he had to be quiet about it. Others were even more openly supportive. We have a terrific ally right now in Catherine Rowe, who is very vocal about her support for us. So times have changed, thanks to wonderful alumni. And I'm going to hold up one souvenir of times past. If you can see it, this is the GALA champagne glass from 15 years ago when we celebrated our 20th anniversary as an organization. And now we're 35. So I want to toast Wayne and Michael Rogan, who's here as well, Steve Morden, so many people who generously gave their time and talents to build up a warm, welcoming environment for gay and lesbian, queer students and faculty and staff on this campus. So we can have no better start to this session today than one of gratitude for those who have gone before and worked so hard, especially our alumni. So Wayne, back to you.
Well, thank you, George. Michael, you have the hard task to follow that. Michael Pemberton is one of the people that I never would have met if it hadn't been for GALA, because our years never overlapped. And he has been a sheer delight to have in my life for the last 30 years. And I'm glad to see that he's here today. And you will find out just why he's so special as we get into this hour, because I think he's very special. But Michael, to you.
Thank you very much, Wayne, and thank you, George, for that great introduction of yourself and of the organization. I have been active since right after graduation. I actually came out 2 months before I graduated, and came out with a moderate bang. And when the first meeting for William and Mary GALA was held in 1986 at the late Stephen Snell's home, I was there. At that meeting, we had people who expressed interest to do various tasks for the organization, and As I was an accounting major and a budding CPA, I, of course, somehow found myself to be treasurer. And then several years later, I was the second president of William & Mary GALA after Steve Snell. And then I found myself as William & Mary's representative and on the board of NetGala, the network of gay and lesbian alumni associations, and helped lead that for a few years. So I have been active, and even after I had left the board of William & Mary GALA, I still came back for homecomings and all that, and was have been very supportive, even to the point of now serving on the board of the foundation of William & Mary GALA. And I'm sorry, I'm not calling it Crim Del Association. It's new to me. I've been calling it William & Mary GALA for such a long time. But I actually, Wayne, you and I did overlap for 1 year. I was a freshman when you were a senior, but we never ran into each other. I'm a CPA and have been for not-for-profits since 1988, including colleges and universities. So no matter what organization I join, at some point I will find myself as treasurer of the organization.
I think that's your curse in life.
Yes.
Thank you both. I thought that particularly for those folks who are either in our audience tonight or who will watch this as a recording later on, that it would probably be useful just to start off by saying, okay, why 1986? Why at this point? And having just lived through, all of us, the last 14, 15 months of a pandemic, I think you can start to imagine, if you didn't live through the 80s, at least a part of why. This was another issue of a government that didn't want to address a looming health crisis. If you were watching the media of 10 days ago on June the 5th, you saw the news coverage of the 40th anniversary of the first cases diagnosed of a strange new disease called GRID, gay-related immune disease, which was the initial name that they gave what we now know as AIDS. And that was a diagnosis and at that point, they hadn't even identified a virus yet, but they thought it probably was viral. They probably thought it couldn't be passed through the air. But so much of what we now take for granted, as far as what knowledge people have of AIDS and HIV, was totally unknown. And we had a government that didn't want to deal with it. We had a president who wouldn't say its name for many years. Not until a friend of his actually died of it would he really talk about it. And we had a community that had started organizing for its own advancement a few years earlier, but we knew, I think, as a community, that we were not going to get any help that we didn't demand or create for ourselves. And so I think a lot of the organizations that we take for granted these days, you're going to see a lot of 35th and 40th anniversaries coming up soon, because many of them were started as a result of what we had to do for ourselves. And there are many organizations that didn't make it. There was such a sense of community in the early 80s that we needed to come together as a community. I know that in Boston, where I was living at the time, every urban community had created an acronym for some sort of community group of people simply to get together, to meet, to form a tighter and more empathic LGBTQ community. Ours in our neighborhood was called Flag Fan, Fenway Lesbian and Gay Friends and Neighbors. People who would simply get together once a month, get to know each other as gay people, as a community of gay people, and have dinner and talk and have fun and go out. And that's just part of the energy that was going on in this community, because we knew that we had to create for ourselves support systems HIV and AIDS was a disease where people would oftentimes wither and die at home because they knew that it wouldn't be passed through the air. For the most part, people knew that. And so that meant that there was, unlike this pandemic, people weren't sequestered in hospitals dying out of sight. The horrific deaths that people died of HIV was out in the open, and all of their friends and loves could watch. And I don't think I'm the only one who felt a little bit of the psychological damage come back in the past year as talk of pandemic and raging sickness was all over the airwaves. So it was in that kind of episode that the desire to organize in all aspects of our society hit our community. And collegiate alumni across the country started doing this. GALA was among the earliest, and within a few years became one of the largest and certainly one of the best funded of the groups that came about. But you see it particularly in the Ivies. I think Columbia and Harvard and Brown and Princeton all were about the same time as we were. It was particularly a focus of what was not happening on our campus. And for many of us who had just graduated a few years earlier, there were still people we knew. There were people that we felt a strong kinship with who were on campus and not being served very well by either their administrations or by the public health apparatus that was in place. And one of GALA's earliest priorities was AIDS education on campus, which certainly did not make us very popular with the conservative Republican who was president of the university at the time. He was one of the presidents that George mentioned as was scared of us, I think, for a while. So certainly AIDS education was one of our first priorities. And as I'm wearing my Cornish Fund button, little souvenir, George had his glass, I have my button. But certainly the idea that many of us, the first place that we went looking for information about who we were was SWAM Library. And so it was important to us that there be resources set aside for people who were doing that sort of journey of exploration, and that was important for us to do. So I think that those first two priorities are certainly things that help explain a little bit about what GALA's real impetus was. Just to wrap up this little section here before I start to encourage more conversation. When I was treasurer and I took over the GALA database at the end of the 90s, I thought it was particularly telling that when I was modernizing it, moving it to a desktop platform, starting to segregate out who was a paid member, who was an unpaid member, how much people had paid so that we could keep track of donations better and just, moving us into the late 20th century. I had to go through the process of segregating out the people who had passed because it was simply, it was dragging down the database to try and sort through all of those records of people who were no longer with us. And at that point, fully 25% of our database was gone. Many of them were initial members, people who had joined right at the very beginning. And it was a sober reminder of just what a price our community paid before treatments and therapies and modern medicines had made it a condition that people could live to a ripe old age with. And so that gives you a little bit of a sense of why GALA was founded, what our first priorities were, and what was the energy behind it. Certainly, Stephen Snell, who was our first president and our founding mother, as we would lovingly refer to him as, was someone who was driven. He was tenacious. and you did not tell Stephen Snell no. That would only make him try harder. And I say that with a great deal of love. Michael, I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the other priorities, particularly as the second president of GALA, as the person who had to follow in some very, very big footsteps.
Yeah.
Still looking over your shoulder.
Yes, and actually I have a story about him looking over my shoulder. Dr. Meyer sent us, I've never met Dr. Meyer, so I'm going to call her Dr. Meyer. She sent us some notes to talk about, and one of that she brought up something that we were involved in, but it's a story about Stephen Snell. And in 1991, we discovered that there was a law on the books, and it was when we were planning homecoming for 1991. And there was a law on the books about serving homosexuals. You couldn't do it to more than 3 at a time, and we fell into the same category as B-girls. Look it up. I'm not sure what a B-girl is. And other lowlifes and not pleasant people to serve them alcohol. And we're like, really? So we took the Attorney General of the state of Virginia to court. We joined an Alexandria nightclub and a lesbian whose name I do not remember, in a suit challenging the Virginia ABC policies that LGBTQ individuals should not be served alcohol in any groups of greater than 3. And so when it came down for the board to vote whether to join the lawsuit, I waited, I passed to see how this was going to fall, to see how it was going to go. And because in my opinion, naive as it was at that time, I was still in my, I was 27. I didn't think we had standing to sue. And so when it was like 5-1 and they came back around to me and cast my vote, I voted no, because I didn't think we should, even though I knew we would because because it was a roll call vote. And Stephen at the end of that meeting lambasted me up one side and down the other. How could the president of the organization? So Stephen was very much a part of was still a part of the organization literally until his death. But the good part about this, I want to point out to you, in case any of you don't know the history, is that we won the suit. The federal court sided with GALA and the other plaintiffs that all such laws, and there were a lot of them across the South, became instantly null and void and could no longer be enforced. Therefore, GALA's actions resulted in a major change for the LGBTQ plus community. And that was a little step in moving things forward for us in the fight for equality and justice. And it let us drink legally.
Well, I remember it also helped us hold events on campus without having to worry about the alcohol policies of a state university. Because until that time, most of our events had been held off campus.
Yes, at a hotel, and we brought this law up to the hotel just to let them know about it, and they're like, "Really? That's a thing? Forget it." But it was still the principle that it was the laws were still on the books, and so we needed to do whatever we could to strike down this type of discrimination where we could.
While we're talking on the issue of legalities too, I think it's important to bring up that in the very early years, the president of the university at the time sought legal advice from the Attorney General of the state of Virginia as to whether or not they could sue us for using the term William and Mary in our organization's title. And at that point, we were incorporated. We were incorporated in the District of Columbia at that point as a nonprofit, although it was not a charity. It was not a 501c3 by the US code. This was simply within the District of Columbia. We were considered a nonprofit organization. But we were incorporated as William and Mary GALA. And the president of the university asked for an opinion from the Attorney General as to whether or not we could legally use that name. Of course, I think that he would have probably gotten involved with the Crown of Great Britain over who actually owned William and Mary. But that was the level of antipathy that that particular university president had towards this organization. If we're talking about Steve Snell stories, I remember one that he used to tell about going up to that university president in a reception line on homecoming weekend in front of the president's house. And I don't think that President Verkuyl had ever met Stephen at that point, so he did not know who he was.
But I think they were approximately the same class year. I know that Stephen was 66. I think Verkuyl may have been about that same year.
So it was. I think Stephen ambushed him because he didn't know he was coming in the line. And from the way that Stephen told the story, he stood holding Verkyl's hand, shaking his hand for quite a long time. And the line was not moving, obviously, and people were kind of, going, so what's the holdup? As Stephen sort of read him the riot act about, how he should not be so hard to deal with as far as GALA was concerned. And he ended up by saying, and at that point, we don't have any heirs. You need our money. Which evidently left Verkuyl with a real baffled look on his face as Stephen moved forward. But the early years of GALA were fighting off some of these issues, but also finding friends. And we had quite a few. There's the unknown friend who, or the rather anonymous friend who let us know about the lawsuit that Verkuyl had asked about. We had friends throughout the university, and certainly I think, George, probably you're the best one to talk about the friends that we had and the way that those friends were able to, say, advance issues in the university faculty senate.
Certainly we have a long history, and if anything should be underscored here is our national leadership in gay and lesbian issues on American campuses. It certainly we were one of the pioneers with William and Mary GALA. Actually, Steve Snell was my house guest for a homecoming, and he announced at breakfast, we really need an alumni association of our own. And I'm a faculty member. I'm used to hearing enthusiastic pronouncements of what's going to happen. And I thought, sure, that's fine. Please keep me informed. Steve Snell went back to Washington and he starts throwing cocktail parties and inviting people and talking to alums. And it was brilliant. We got off to a good start, partially because of the monetary issue. We have no heirs. Well, yes. I mean, actually, once GALA started raising money, we turned on a tap that wouldn't be turned off easily. And we were raising new money. New money is from donors who had never given before. And if there's anything that makes a university advancement team salivate, it's new money. We provided significant new money at a very prompt rate, which in the beginning, university said, we can certainly accept your money, but not in your name. So we went to the library and talked to Nancy Marshall. And Nancy Marshall, our university librarian, said, of course I'll use your name. And that's how we started the Richard Cornish Fund. And by the way, Wayne's got his button. I have plenty of gay activist early 1990s buttons. If anyone doesn't have a button, just write to me and I'll make sure you get one. But we have a very deep archive now and special collections for the William and Mary GALA history. So if you want to see the early rosters of topics discussed at the Gay Student Support Group, the activities for William and Mary Gala, some of the events and sponsorship we did on campus. Really, we have plumped the archives of the university, and there are thousands of documents in there waiting to be discovered. I have to give credit to Lisa Meyer, professional historian, who professionalized our history as William and Mary Gala, and I have to give her a lot of credit for doing that. But the groundswell from among our membership, our faculty, our students, our alums has been tremendous. And Wayne is right, we have allies all over campus. When I first arrived in 1982, I was pretty much out, cautiously, judiciously, but there were colleagues who told me, George, don't come out until you get tenure. And I thought, if I can't come out until I get tenure, I don't know if I want to be here. And actually, it worked in my favor because there was so much sympathy among colleagues and administrators on campus that it actually protected me through the entire tenure process until I was tenured. I hope I deserved it, but people were making sure that no anti-gay sentiment leaked into the process anywhere. And I think it was much to our community's credit that we wanted to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And politics in Richmond be damned, the sentiment of our community was very clearly in favor of our community. Sam Sadler made sure that a non-discrimination policy got into the student handbook shrewdly as a typographical change over the summer when no one was looking. He said, we'll see if anyone makes a fuss when we get back in the fall. No one noticed, and it's been in the student handbook ever since. And that was the first breakthrough that we had in any official capacity. No one noticed, it's been on the books. Sam Sadler told me that if no one complains within a few years, it's precedent. So we clung to that. Same thing, as Wayne knows, with AIDS education. My background is sort of, because I'm a professional medievalist, I have to be careful of that. You tell people you're a professional medievalist, they back away from you at cocktail parties. I have the primary requirement, which is a very high threshold of boredom. The thing is, as a professional medievalist, I was doing AIDS education. I was doing suicide prevention because it wasn't incorporated into an official level, even from the counseling center. They couldn't be as public about their support as they wanted to be because of institutional breaks on any sort of visibility. Even though their sentiment was there, their support was there, they needed someone who was already out to speak about suicide, to speak about AIDS. And there was a moral imperative there because I saw faculty members and staff members and students, especially, becoming sick with HIV and dying at home. And that was the problem. We were letting them get infected on campus. They would disappear and die at home. We have a moral responsibility as educators to keep our students alive. We can't do that. We can't do anything else. And so AIDS education became part of the mission of the Monday Night Support Group and of William and Mary Gala. And so we have a long and I think very successful history of taking part in the public life of this campus and benefiting the entire campus, not just our community, but saving straight kids from becoming infected with HIV, for benefiting other minority and interest groups who wanted to step forward and could follow our pattern. You're doing it for the LGBTQ community, you should do it for ours as well. We both politicized and depoliticized minority rights on our campus. So it's a great success story. And if you need a gay activist button, I've got spares for all of you. So, Wayne.
Well, and you talk about some of these artifacts. I mean, for those who saw last week's presentation, it was actually very, very fun. I had never seen the press release. You talk about Stephen's cocktail parties. I had never seen the press release that he actually printed up and sent out. And I'm sure that gay newspapers across the country, because they're always looking for positive news, I'm sure that they all printed it up. And, it was, it's a watershed event, but only Stephen could have sent out press releases because he'd had a cocktail party at his house. It's just a part of the chutzpah that he always gave to everything that he did. I know that
upset with us. Part of our threat was to make green and gold condoms, even have them printed with "Go Tribe."
Right.
And the president went ballistic. We didn't have to do it. The threat was
archivists last week showed they're in the collection in SWEM. The green and gold condoms are in SWEM's collection, and the archivist, who of course was probably born in this century, but or not that far before, it wondered out loud, I wonder how the president reacted to that. I can tell you how the president reacted to that. He was not happy.
No.
There were green and gold condoms circulating on campus, but that only made them more fun to wear.
Actually, I was called into the president's office during that precise juncture, and impromptu, I got a phone call, show up in the Brafferton, and I did. And I'm surrounded by 8 men in suits, and it, for a bawling out. And I sat back and I thought, I'm the only person here that the president can't fire. That's what tenure is for. We have the job security and social immunities that allow us to speak up on when students can't, when staff can't, when buildings and grounds and housekeeping can't. People in food service deserve the same protections as the faculty. And we have a special responsibility to push these issues forward, to provide those securities for others. I think that's part of our heritage, part of our responsibility, and part of the legacy that we leave behind as William and Mary GALA.
It was to look at the Mr. Fox's comment. It was a different institution, and some of it had changed by the time I got here in 1978 and left in 1982. The archivist last week showed one of the early articles about one of the first meetings of the Lambda Alliance, which was meeting on campus in my years there. And of course, George was starting his meetings probably the year after I left. So there was starting to be some Williamsburg delayed effect of gay liberation in the late 70s and early 80s. And I think a lot of people felt that they didn't have to pay attention in Williamsburg because we were so far away from New York and San Francisco and the big gay places. But certainly one of the things that HIV did bring home was that no place was too far away, and people did start to get sick, and people did start to need the kind of education that GALA was more than willing to provide and took some heat to do.
And there was just the need to make people know about us, because we marched and we were very well received. I won't say we were the biggest group or whatever, but we marched in New York City Pride, the 1987 March on Washington, I believe even the 1993 March on Washington. And so we were participants in national events. I won't say we were nationally known, but we were participants in national events, national coming out events, if you will. And so that was also, that's how far reaching that our effect was, yes.
Well, I know that in my years as president, I was approached on various times by at least, I would say at least a dozen universities that were interested in the GALA template that we use.
Get yourself a Steve Snell.
And not all universities went in the same direction that William and Mary did as far as needing to have an independent. I mean, I think that's the thing that shook up the Society of the Alumni the most, was that some groups of alumni actually organized something else. But some universities needed to do that because they were not finding much support in their university structure for a gay and lesbian alumni. And some were having much better luck and actually having support within the university so that they could, you know, keep the alumni energy and the alumni dollars in the corral, so to speak. But with you had a much greater exposure to the national scene than I did, Michael. So I'd be very interested to just see what you felt about when you were working with Net Gala. What was William and Mary Gala's influence as far as the national scene was concerned?
William and Mary Gala's, it was sort of, as you mentioned, a template, and a lot of schools wrote Net Gala asking for information. And again, because I was on the board, often I provided ours. It appeared to be, you know, somewhat successful, although, you know, if schools, you know, came back with, well, I don't think that's going to work, they you know, maybe they might see, we might give them what Oberlin had done, or what maybe Brown had done, just as an example. So we were probably the first example given of a successful organization, a first among many, or first among several, that, you know, that we were able to provide as a template or as an outline for other organizations to use. I can't remember the years that I worked with Net Gala, but that was, you know, our impression, because the person who was the chair, who was the only chair, I think he was from, I think that I want to say Brown, but don't quote me on that. And that's why I keep using Brown as an example, because that's what we used. But, you know, and as more schools came on board or provided us information on how they were formed, we had a bigger pool to pull from for that information. And so, you know, and even Net Gala, I know at least marched in New York City Pride, because the person who was the chair was a New York City resident. So, you know, we were out there. I don't know how effective we were, but we were out there and well known.
Well, I also want to just point out, because I see a comment from Carlton Hardy in the comments, and it's good to know you're out there, Carlton. Carlton was one of our very early and long-serving area coordinators, and that's how GALA organized itself on the local level. Not all of our activities or emphasis was on just Williamsburg. As we became a national organization, and as it became clear from our database that we had members all over the country, and in fact, we even had some in Europe for a while, we did decentralize and try and give a GALA official face that people could be in contact with as they moved from one city to the other, because that was our biggest problem, is that as young alumni, people had a tendency to move from one city to the next. Keeping up with them as they moved turned out to be a real challenge as far as snail mail addresses, because didn't have none of them email addresses then. So, you know, keeping track of people was a problem. And the area coordinators helped greatly, not only to bring in local people that they knew were local William and Mary alum into the organization, but also then to provide a support system for social activities. And, you know, many of them gave William and Mary parties at their home or in other spaces for William and Mary alums in their area, and to help provide that social connection and that connection to the university. And quite frankly, many people that particularly as I was treasurer and started doing dues renewals and would get notes back from people, people would scrawl on their renewal form notes that I would read and pass along to the rest of the board at times. And many of them were telling me that they had had no connection to the university at all prior to GALA being formed, and that many of them didn't necessarily want a connection with the university yet, because they still had had experiences that left them very traumatized by the way that they ran in with various university officials or certain officers in the administration who did not treat them as well as they thought they should be. And so they didn't want a connection with the university, but they wanted a connection with GALA. And many people made friends through GALA that they would never have made with, and renewed ties with the university that they would never have done if GALA hadn't existed. And I think that's probably one of the most long-lasting things that GALA did do, was to find a way for people who had been alienated from the university to come back to the university, even if it was just through us. And I cannot, just from my experience over the last few years with Ivana and Val and the people who are now in university advancement, and President Rowe, and in going back, Taylor Reevely was just an incredibly gracious and supportive president. There were many years when GALA was still holding homecomings and homecoming events where we would have marvelous off-campus parties at Jim Gokenauer's house, and I hope that Jim is out there, because he was a lifeline for us for many years. But Taylor and his wife would come to our party as the end of their homecoming day and just stay there. I mean, the first time a university president came to one of our events was, I think, Gene Nickel, who came to our 20th anniversary celebration, and we got him for about 2.5 minutes. But
we'll take it.
We took it. I mean, no president had ever darkened our door till that point. But Taylor just took it to a whole different realm, and was just so warm and so supportive, and would be with us. Really, he'd close up the party, and that was certainly a revelation for many of us. For our 25th anniversary, we finally got into the Holy of Holies. We finally got a reservation for the Great Hall, and he spoke, and it was just things began to really change under his administration. And he is so gentlemanly and so Southern and so Virginian in his manner that a lot of people, I think, would truly be surprised just what a sea change he was for the university, at least as far as our community was concerned. George, was he as revolutionary as from a faculty perspective as he seemed to be for us?
Taylor was interesting because he was a runner-up when Gene Nickel was chosen as president. And we lost a good man, we gained a good man. Taylor Reevely really knew the law school and the legal profession best of all, but he rapidly schooled himself in what is William & Mary as a complete campus. And he was courageous in the face of opposition from Richmond, in the face of opposition from political leaders who made fun of William & Mary. He was just loyal and dogged to the institution and to us and to other groups throughout the campus. So he was a brilliant leader for our university, and we were lucky to have him, not only as gay people, but for the entire institution. So I'm very grateful to Taylor.
He certainly inherited turmoil. And there was certainly a lot of, I was just reminded of an incident during Gene Nickel's presidency where the first transgender homecoming student, I don't want to say homecoming queen, but the first homecoming student representative, the first transgender was elected, and that was national news. I didn't tell many people, but Bill O'Reilly actually got in touch with me, wanted me to come on his show on Fox to talk about it. And I said, no, thank you. No, I'm an alum. That was a student choice, and we support it. We support their ability and their desire to make that choice. And I have nothing to say that you would want to hear. All you're going to do is try and pick a fight, and that's not what I'm interested in. We support their choice. But there was just so much attention to William and Mary between the cross in the chapel controversy and then the transgender homecoming court. William and Mary was, for a while, very much on the radar screens of particularly the conservative media as one of the universities that had taken, lefty liberalism perhaps a little too far in their eyes. And we were quite happy to be that.
In the early 90s, one of the other ways that we led the nation was starting in a conversation. We held an entire conference on campus about domestic partner benefits in higher education. We announced the conference. We got support from other campuses, University of Richmond, Virginia Tech, VCU, ODU, who sent representatives. I think we had 15 campuses come to William and Mary to learn about domestic partner benefits in higher education in America. And there was a deafening silence from the Brafferton, who disassociated themselves but couldn't stop the faculty from holding a conference. We had a very fruitful discussion. We couldn't advance the issue within Virginia, but we certainly raised its profile and proved that it was a national conversation in which we were clearly voices in that national conversation. It eventually was eclipsed. We got domestic partner benefits. There were civil unions. Now finally legal marriage. I'm married to a William and Mary alum who has 2 degrees from his institution, Tom Wood, undergraduate, class of 73, and then he came back for a graduate program in computer science. But gosh, we are now, I married him in the Wren Chapel in 1989. We were civil unionized in Vermont. We were eventually married in Massachusetts, at which time I told Tom, I've married you 3 times. I'm not marrying you again. It was a national joke for gay people. What is this? Collect all, take the tour, collect all 50. I think our appreciation of gay couples on campus, now included in hiring decisions for spousal hires, is a clear sign of our advancement as an institution. And William and Mary GALA, again, has provided some of the momentum for the community and for the institution that has clearly made a difference.
We are going to have a question and answer session, which, according to my timeline, is about to begin now. But before we open it up, I just wanted to let either of you have a minute or two if there's anything else that you particularly felt you needed to get out into the ether. Otherwise, we'll start talking to those of us who have been listening to us talk for a while. And to John Fox, I can imagine that there was particularly a different subculture. I know that GALA heard from people who were in William and Mary in the 60s who did have some really awful experiences. I'm sure that there were many people who didn't. And I guess because it wasn't perhaps as traumatic as the bad experiences, we didn't hear about them. We didn't hear people talking about it as much. I would love to hear tales of a better William and Mary experience in the 60s. But certainly we got a lot of rather long diatribes from people about the experiences that they had that were not so pleasant. So if you'd like to, if you feel like typing it into the chat, please do so. But we certainly are interested in any questions or anything from our audience that you'd like to hear us talk about that or talk more about. Certainly the archivists last week had quite a lot. And I know that Steve Merton has donated pretty much all of his GALA related stuff. I know that Stephen Snell did. The bits and pieces of, Stephen had given me a lot of the things that we used to carry in parades. Because Stephen had a banner or a flag or something for everybody. I think only if we'd had about 50 or 60 people would he have ever run out of stuff to carry down, the streets of DC or New York or wherever. All of that stuff is now at SWEM. I unloaded my trunk at the back of SWEM about 5 years ago. So, and all the records that I'd had as far as Treasury's records, dues renewals, all of that paper ephemera is now in the SWEM archive. So I know that at some point in the future, there will be a lot of research going on. And one of the things that we haven't talked about or mentioned yet is the Stevens Project, which is the video oral history. I know many of us have sat down and been questioned, and that is also a part of the archive. I would encourage anybody who is listening to this, who has stories to tell that they want preserved for posterity and for researchers and for students in the future, contact SWEM. The archivists last week said that they do have some funding now. They can record new ones. They can even come to you in some circumstances. If I guess there's some revenue sharing that needs to go on in order to get everybody to where they need to be. But they are funded, and they have money for more recordings and more oral histories, and would love to have anybody who is listening to this give their story. So I know that Ivana is saying that Mr. Fox can't use the video right now to tell us, but I would encourage him to contact SWEM and tell all of us through the Oral History Project, because I think that's an important part of William & Mary's history that does need to be cataloged and kept for posterity. So please do that. Stephen Merton's also writing. He's in the process of giving his entire book collection to SWEM, and 2 previous collections donated before him. So, I think we're helping SWEM Library really become a major A archive, and that I think is fabulous. Hello, Ivana.
Hello again. So first, we have some questions in the chat, so I'm not ending us at all, but I just want to acknowledge how dynamic you 3 are as a panel. It's really quite interesting that you didn't quite touch base at William & Mary, nor with Dr. Lisa Meyer, who was supposed to be here, yet through GALA, you've changed the complete landscape of the LGBTQ+ community and larger William & Mary community at William & Mary. So I am so thankful. This is exactly the essence of the 35th celebration of GALA. You all have laid the foundation for the work that I do, and I'm really thankful for your presence and your thoughts. With that, we've got 2 super good questions in the chat. I want to save one for last because I think it could be a good closing sentiment. Michael has asked, GALA has gone, and LGBTQ+ alums and students have gone from anonymity to antagonist, to activist, to ally, to partner. Now the organization GALA is a full constituent under the name Creme Del Society. Can you tell us a little bit more about this recreation? Wayne, I will ping this one over to you since you helped name the organization, and while you answer, I will type the link in the chat.
Well, certainly a handful of us were invited, I guess it's close to 2 years ago now, to take part in what were called leadership circles by the Office of University Advancement. And I know that all of us who did get together and sort of chat a little bit about it beforehand were a little, what's going on here? What is the point? What is going on at William & Mary? Because to be honest, Ivana, we had not had a lot of open invitations from the university before then. But we all came to Williamsburg at your invite, and have been really impressed over the last 2 years with the way that the university has been trying to remake itself when it comes to the atmosphere on campus. I've been just incredibly impressed with the students that have been involved, and the recent graduates that have been involved in this process. I believe at one point you and Val had statistics that talked about the fact that nearly half, if not slightly over half, of the student body now identifies as a member of a community other than mainstream, which is quite a change from what the student makeup would have been, even when I was there in the late 70s and early 80s. And so there is a need for the university to really start to look at the atmosphere that it creates for its students, and this has all been a part of it. The definition, certainly, as we've talked about, GALA first was gay and lesbian alumni, and then very quickly new letters got added to the acronym. And GALA didn't change its name simply, I think, because you could speak the acronym, and many of the acronyms later on did not lead themselves to a word. GALA also implied celebration, which was certainly a part of what we wanted to get across. But we realized that the name needed to change. And as the efforts of people in the 80s made it more possible for a broader and more refined definition of our community. I mean, when you're first being oppressed, breaking those bonds, coming out, gay and lesbian was a much broader term. And that was what everybody found a way to be a part of. But as we met with success, as our efforts, I guess, bore fruit, it was possible to further refine, okay, what part of that community am I? And what name do I want? As opposed to being lumped in under the pre-existing letters. And so the whole idea of just keeping to add letters on just wasn't really something that we wanted to get involved with. And so we looked at what specific to William and Mary, because we were impressed with the Serpentine Society at the University of Virginia, the curving walls, nothing straight. It was a name that gave an essence to that community, but also was specifically UVA. So we started looking at what specifically William and Mary could have that kind of impact and effect on the community. And certainly in our discussions, the one place that was emblematic of love, any kind of love, all love for ourselves, love for others, love for our chosen lover, was Crimdell. It was the place that love of any kind has been and can be expressed. And so the idea of using that as our symbol of love is love is love seemed to us to be the most appropriate name to take. And so the Crimdell Association was born, and I'm hoping we'll have a very long and prosperous future. And to give a little plug to next week's seminar, hello. Next week's seminar at this same time, Tuesday at 4, will not be a webinar. It will be a group where everybody sees one another, and we'll get broken down into groups. And we can talk about the future. We've looked at the archives, the physical past. We've now talked a lot about the history and how we got to where we are, which I'm so glad is being recorded, because I think it's important that long after we're gone, this record of what has happened here will still be there. But now, next week will be the chance for people who want to have a voice as far as the future is concerned, can have that voice heard. And I think that's going to be, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an incredibly vibrant discussion. And so I'll shut up and I'll leave it at that.
That was completely beautiful, as usual, Wayne. You have a way with words. So now I'm reading the previous question. Now that I'm reading the previous question, I think it was actually supposed to go with the one that I read aloud, but I'm going to spin it a little bit because I still want to hear your perspectives. If you could summarize the GALA timeline in a series of words, sort of like what I just read, the anonymity, if I could say that word, to activism, to fully a part of the university, what words would each of you choose for the timeline?
George?
You're punting to me.
I want to go last on that because there's something I want to bring up as a part of that.
I think there's a steady arc of progress and also of integration. That is to say, we were sort of isolated and desperate to find allies, who were out there, but they were hard to identify in the beginning. And now more and more people want to be our ally, want to come out publicly and say that this is part of their value system, if not their personal life experience. That there's no one left in America, hardly, who doesn't know a gay person, doesn't have one as part of their family, their circle of friends, a coworker. This has gone mainstream. And it was always our intent not to radicalize this issue, but to domesticate it. Because the home, the family, is where this issue resides. And if we're going to make William and Mary a home and a family for others, we should include this as part of our heartfelt mission as educators and as American citizens.
And if anyone who knows Michael Rogan, who wrote that list of words, knows he is an expert wordsmith. I think that what he wrote and what you read, Ivana, is a very good, well-selected word list of the arc that I'm familiar with. I don't have any history before 1985, basically. Although GALA started in 1986, but I think it's been a steady progression of a lot of the way that gay and lesbian issues have been addressed by society. And I think it's not to diminish it, but I think it's just like how the college alumni viewpoint has come through that same arc to where we are currently.
I think that if you were going to try and describe that arc in one word, I think the word is Boswell. And this gets to something that Lisa Meyer in particular wanted to elaborate on, and that is that we first became aware of John Boswell not long, I guess, after he passed. In my job at the publishing house, I actually got to speak to him once before he died, because he had unearthed a monograph and written a monograph rather about a same-sex commitment ceremony that he had unearthed during his research. It was from the late medieval period in the Eastern Church, where clearly members of the same sex were in a church-sanctioned commitment ceremony. I won't go so far as to call it a wedding ceremony, but it was a commitment ceremony. And my publisher that I worked for had been interested in trying to, I guess, work with him to try and get something more than the monograph out of that. And unfortunately, he passed away before any of that could take place. But it was important. One of the things to us was important that such a man of incredible scholarship, who was openly gay, who was lost to HIV far, far too early. There were quite a few landmark histories that he would have written had it not been for HIV. It was important that we remember him And so, for those who do not know his story, I mean, he was undergraduate at William and Mary, I think, and I always lose track as to, I think he was graduate Harvard, professor at Yale. So he had all of the major Ivies there, you know. I consider William and Mary a major Ivy, all tied up. And he was quite a personality from everybody I know who had ever met him. And one of the first things that GALA wanted to do with some of our friends in the history department was to try and commemorate him. And so we worked with Lisa Meyer and Sarah Lipton in the medievalist programs to do the first of many. In fact, there's never been a year since that there hasn't been a Boswell lecture. GALA funded it for many years because the administration had no money for it, and the history department had no money for it. And at first it was, you know, it was seeking a way to get him into the pantheon really of William and Mary graduates against resistance, because his seminal works were all about gay and lesbian history, the history of sexuality. It was not one of those historians that the university was really interested in holding up and embracing at the time. We made sure that that was something that they did acknowledge, and his brilliance was acknowledged officially. And through the years, that evolved as this whole arc of cooperation and acceptance has evolved, until now, a month ago, the building that at that point housed the history department is now named for him. I think that in and of itself describes the arc that the questioner, hello Michael, was bringing up, because that level of, I mean, it still chokes me up a little bit that the history building that I went into as a history major is now no longer Morton Hall, but it's John Boswell Hall. That to me that says it all.
I had somehow missed that memo.
You missed that memo?
Yes.
I honestly do not know if without GALA's involvement, without creating the Boswell lecture, without pushing the Boswell lecture, without many of us coming religiously every year to the Boswell lecture to make sure that it had an audience, and that these scholars that were coming in from around the country and around the world had people to talk to. I don't know. Would there be a Boswell Hall now? I don't know, but I know there is.
I was happy to bring John Boswell back to campus for his first and only return to his alma mater on behalf of the program in medieval and Renaissance studies here. And John spoke on campus with devastating clarity and warmth and engagement. He really proved himself at the top of his profession. He went on, not only graduating from William and Mary and then from Harvard, but joined the faculty at Yale. Talk about discrimination. He was tenured, but without a promotion to associate professor. The forces of darkness. The next year, the forces of light gathered, and they made him the youngest full professor in the history of Yale. And he went on to become chair of the Department of History at Yale. So the best of all worlds, a William and Mary education, a Harvard degree, a job at Yale. So it was a clean run.
What a full circle moment. I love that. And I want to ask the last question. I will probably tackle this one just a bit. It's about whether Crimdell is planning any other panels like this with a big group of participants, including students, not just during homecoming or for alums. Short answer is yes. We want students to show up to everything. That is why we are recording this panel and we'll distribute it via the Crimdell William and Mary Alumni Association website, but students are also invited. I think that our students are a little tired of Zoom. I think that might explain any absences we're seeing this summer, but this fall we'll be doing Zoom and in person. Students really want to connect with alumni, with faculty members, And so if you're interested in engaging that way, I'm going to type my email in the chat because we do want to see you with students on campus. And then the last little note I'll share is homecoming will be in person this year. So Dr. Greenia earlier mentioned how important it was for GALA to politicize, but also depoliticize minoritized identities. All three of the identity-based alumni groups I mentioned earlier, plus the Huron Willis Association of Black African American Descent Alumni, will be hosting a huge group tailgate outside of the newly renovated Alumni House some date during homecoming. It's October 7th through 10th. You'll get an email from me and from other William and Mary staffers inviting you to come to meet with fellow alums, to have food and drinks, and just spend some time with one another. And then the last thing I'll say in response to that question is, if you've seen someone's name from this event and you've lost touch with them, please write me because I can connect you to them via email, and I'm happy to do that. And with that, I will turn it over to our panelists for closing. I didn't see any more questions in the chat. This has been absolutely wonderful, and I'm so thankful to you all for the work that you've done. Again, Wayne, to answer your question from a second ago, I don't think the campus would look like this. I think GALA and its existence and your work completely changed the fabric of William and Mary, and I thank you. Thank you all.
As moderator, I'll reserve the right to go last. So Michael, would you like to have any last famous words for posterity?
All I'll say is I am not as polished a speaker as Wayne and George are. I tend to be a little down home and not a little irrelevant towards subjects. So when I was asked to speak at this, I was a little trepidatious. But working with Ivana and with George and Wayne, it has been very exciting for me. And I hope that it has been informative, although most of the people in the chat know most of what happened or in the participant list. But I thank you very much. I thank all of you, and I thank you, Ivana, for including me in this.
Then I'll say two partial words, lav grad. We now celebrate every graduation during commencement, a special ceremony for our gay and lesbian and queer students to have a special moment at graduation, to graduate with their friends and family. Some are not completely out, but many others are dragging everyone they can in with them. President Rowe comes, members of the Board of Visitors come, Lav Grad, the Lavender graduation ceremony. It's for our community. And so our students get a special moment at commencement as well. That speaks well for the future and for the integration, the unity of our community. Thank you. Wayne.
I thank all of you for taking part. I'm sorry that Lisa Meyer wasn't able to, but I think it speaks volumes that for the first time in our history, GALA didn't have to organize its own anniversary. The university organized the celebration of GALA's anniversary. And even though GALA no longer officially exists, except for the GALA Foundation, I know that the Crimdell Association is going to hopefully remedy some of the discrepancies and issues that GALA has always had by being an independent organization, and be much more a voice for the entire community than we ever could have been. And I hope that the events like this will just help give students of the future appreciation for what they have and where it came from, as well as the Steve Snell-like tenacity to make sure that they never lose it. So I hope that we get to see everybody here and actually talk to you again next week when we're looking at the future of this movement and this community and this university. Thank you all.